My name is Noah Leigh, and I am the founder and lead investigator for the Paranormal Investigators of Milwaukee.
From conversations to the natural world to complete silence.
So many of us focus on what's next rather than what is happening now. I'm Listening is a podcast that dissects the importance of listening.
I'm Drew Richmond.
And I'm Bran Christofferson.
And this is I'm Listening, a podcast simply about the skill of listening.
So we're here with Noah, and let's give a little bit of background. And Noah, we ask for your forgiveness as we go through this because Brant and I don't know anything about this. So we're sitting here brainstorming, preparing for our season and going through all these little details. And one of our ideas was ghosts. And so instead of Brant and I guessing and talking about that like a couple of idiots just trying to figure it all out, we're like, well, let's see if we can find somebody that actually does this for a living or a hobby or whatever this is, that actually knows something about this piece. And we found you. Please explain to us, what is paranormal investigation?
Sure. Paranormal investigation is looking into claims of paranormal activity. Paranormal activity can be defined in many different ways. The term paranormal actually covers a number of things that have nothing to do with ghosts or entities or whatever you want to call them. It also includes cryptozoology for things like Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster, and also covers ufology or unidentified flying objects, or UAPs as they're called now. But when it comes to the paranormal with PIM, with myself, and PIM, again, I abbreviate Paranormal Investigators of Milwaukee as PIM, P-I-M, we only focus on the hauntings aspect. So when we do a paranormal investigation, essentially what we're doing is we're looking at those claims of purported paranormal activity, and we're going in and trying to see if we can, first and foremost, find a normal explanation for those claims. And so we utilize a lot of different tools and experience from us doing this. So I started PIM in 2007. I started investigating the paranormal in 2005. So I've been doing paranormal investigation for a long time myself. And over that time, I've learned a lot about what the field looks at as paranormal evidence and what most of that actually is. I've also learned a lot about the systems in a home, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and how little most of us know about those systems in our homes. Sure. And when something starts making weird noises or, smells or whatever, like, a lot of people don't go to, something's wrong with my furnace. It's, something paranormal is happening. Every time XYZ occurs, then this weird smell happens, and then something falls off the counter, and I think it's paranormal. And it takes, regimented investigation to figure that out.
Okay. Last year we did an episode on scary noises.
Okay.
And Drew and I went through just a number of different things. You were mentioning like the HVAC system or plumbing. Mm-hmm. And so we were like trying to come up, okay, what are all these different like rational explanations for what these noises might be? And what is it about them that scare us to get us thinking about what is this? We did not get to really explore the paranormal. We wrote everything off as, this could be a mental issue or a hearing issue or a sleep apnea or a HVAC system. There is a space, though, for that unknown. And I'm sure that's why people are reaching out to you, because they're like, what is this? How do we do this? What are you seeing? What are you hearing when you are out on an investigation?
A lot of noise from the surrounding environment. So, almost every place is located near a road of some sort. So a lot of car noise. There is a lot of, neighbor noise, houses that are close by. We have activity that are happening at those houses, sometimes internally, sometimes externally, depending. Music, you have animals, so dogs barking, birds chirping. These are all things that we hear, and depending on the location, it's more or less prevalent, depending on, how close you are to the next property or where you're next to. So for instance, if you're near a business, if you're near a factory, you're going to hear factory noises. And sometimes you think, oh, what noise does a factory make? Everything's inside, they're making quiet stuff. It's not like a metal stamping factory or something like that, but all factories have a lot of ventilation. So you have a constant fan noise, humming noise like that's coming. And that during the day doesn't seem like it's a lot, but when you're being very quiet and trying to hear very small noises, it becomes overwhelming about how loud that noise actually is. So these are all sorts of things that we have to keep in mind when we're investigating it. And sometimes it's the explanation for the claim is those sorts of noises that are being heard inside of a location that people just don't realize how sound operates. And it can sound so much like it's inside of a property when it's actually not. It's external. But when you get scared, this is outside the realm of this podcast, but human psychology plays a huge role in the paranormal. And once you get into that fight or flight mode and you've chosen flight, you're not going to ever figure out what that ever was, right? Like, unless it happens on a routine basis, it's going to become a story. And so these are the sorts of things that we go in and look at, but sound plays a huge role in paranormal investigation. It's the number one piece of quote unquote evidence that gets captured during an investigation, but it's also the easiest thing to contaminate by the people doing the investigation. And so we actually take a lot of time and effort to try and make sure that we are being as careful as possible during our investigations to ensure that we're not contaminating our own investigation whenever possible.
There's two things. Brant brought up that episode that we had done before, and I just looked into the notes while you're talking through that. And you said the psychology behind it, or the mental component of this, not to get into that. We love getting into that.
Oh,
and
okay.
actually, when we were going through this component of scary things, was it pareidolia?
Mm-hmm.
Pareidolia, yeah.
Noah, are you familiar with that term?
Absolutely. I'm familiar with that term. It's very, very common in pictures. People will bring, we do library events where we go to local libraries around us and we do a presentation on the paranormal, talk about it from our perspective, what we think it is and what it isn't. And we do a section on pictures because before the advent of like ring cameras and stuff like that, the most common thing people would capture would be some sort of picture. Like the average person,
Sure.
Not someone doing investigation. And they'd have some weird, face in it or something like that. And so, we have to explain to people, that's pareidolia. Matrixing is another term for pareidolia, but it's essentially your mind making sense out of nonsense. And the best example you give is clouds, right? You look up at the clouds and you can see a brontosaurus or a hippopotamus or whatever. And that's just your mind looking and saying, this is something that's familiar to me. And even though there's not a giant hippopotamus in the sky, you can like make out that image. The same thing happens all the time with photographs between like smoky things, either exhaled breath, like during when it's cold outside, or actual cigarette smoke or other mists and things like that can occur because of just normal weather in fog. Or things where you have like a surface or a structure that basically it doesn't have a set pattern to it. So a great example is tree bark. So you have different levels of tree bark. And if you look at it in certain ways, you could figure out images in it. And as humans, we are hardwired to look for human face and human shapes. It's when we're babies, it's what makes us know that thing that's coming towards me is a good thing, not something I should be scared of. That's what we learn as babies. And so that's just kind of what we default to when we're looking at something like, well, what is that? That looks weird. We're looking for faces. We're looking for human images. And that's when it's great when we can go to those locations and replicate whenever possible those sorts of images.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. We just kind of hit two separate things here. One is the environment and looking for evidence in that environment. And you mentioned of not contaminating that. And then the second part is the perception of that environment. What is it that I'm perceiving that makes me feel, think, believe, whatever it is? You've got a lot to work with here. Let's start with the environment, and we're looking for evidence in the environment. What kind of evidence are you looking for, or what kind of evidence are you listening for when it comes to your investigations?
Yeah, so there's generally three pieces. It's audible, It's photographic or it's video that people are referring to. Video is sometimes an experience. So someone will say, I saw a old woman dressed in period clothing at the end of the hall. So then that would turn into something that we're trying to have a camera covering that area so that we can ensure that we're, if that happens again, we can capture it on video, not just a story that someone's telling us. Audible is anything from I heard footsteps, or I hear a weird noise, and then the description of whatever that weird noise might be, to I heard voices, my name, someone screaming. Like, it could be almost anything. And in that instance, we have audio recorders. We use Zoom H1 recorders because they have a very good quality recorder. It's got the crisscross microphone, so you get that 360 sound. You can record for a very long time, and you can record in an uncompressed format, which is WAVE, so that we're ensuring we're getting a complete audio recording from that investigation that we can refer back to. One thing that we've learned is that we as adults have really bad hearing. You have the best hearing when you're like 12 or 13, as long as you don't listen to like a lot of like really loud music. And then
that was me.
Yes, exactly. Or if you work at a metal stamping factory, like that too also will get rid of it.
Yeah. And
then you lose those frequencies on either end, the low and the high end. So we play audio at the events that we do at the libraries, and it's clips that we can't explain. Like, hey, listen to this, let me know if you can hear it. And we don't tell them what it says, because that's a trick that the paranormal shows do. They'll put up an audio recording and they'll play it and they'll put the words underneath it so you only could hear that. It's like when you mislearn the lyrics to a song, right? If you learn them wrong, it's almost impossible to hear them right, even if you can read them right off of the liner notes. The people often that will hear the most words are kids. It's not a great environment. It's in a bigger room, and they don't have headphones or anything like that. They're just listening to it play off a speaker. The moral of the story is we can't rely on what we hear and then take that to be a good representation of our environment, because there's so many things that can affect what we're actually hearing versus what an audio recorder can actually record, because it's capturing everything. It doesn't get tired. It's not overstimulated or understimulated. It's not too much caffeine. It's not hungry. It's a recorder. It's going to do its job no matter what. So that's what we always refer back to. And when we're doing those sorts of investigations, we're ensuring that we're documenting ourselves within that recording, so that if we're making noise, if we're doing something, it's always very clear and evident that we are doing that. And then if something weird happens, we always timestamp it so we can go back and listen to it later and compare it to other audio and video recordings that we have going throughout the property. So we don't just have one recorder. We have a recorder on every single investigator that acts as their individual control. And then we have stationary recorders placed strategically in the location where those, claims of activity have occurred. So that's what we're trying to do, is when we're there, we're asking questions to see if we can get whatever happened to happen again, or to capture something responding to our questions, because we're not really sure exactly what might be going on. So we don't do photographic evidence of the paranormal. We think there are way too many things that it can be that you can capture in a single frame of video, essentially. And so what we do is we spend a lot of time replicating pictures. So if we have an image from a location, we will spend as much time as we can to try and see if we can replicate it. And we actually were at a location over the summer, and we were able to do exactly that. We were able to figure out exactly where it was taken and how and what was actually happening in regards to that picture that was taken. So you have picture, audio, video.
So you'll replicate that to say, oh, see, it was the light coming in at this time and reflected off of this thing that was in the glass of water that was half full, and that's what created the cast on the shadow, and you go through that process and go, no, you're good.
Yeah.
Is your goal with this to prove, this sounds terrible, is your goal to prove that they're wrong?
My goal is to hopefully be able to figure out the truth of what happened at any certain situation and have evidence to support those conclusions. Whether that is a normal explanation or a paranormal explanation, I always leave it up to the evidence that we can gather during that investigation. We treat each case, especially when we're dealing with the public. My goal is to try to document as much as possible and come up with something at the end of the day, whatever it is. I'm not making definitive conclusions. This place is haunted. This place isn't haunted. No, it's nothing like that. It's like, on this investigation, this is what we experienced. On this investigation, this is what we captured, or this is what we were able to debunk or come up with a normal explanation for that has been, historically shown as some paranormal piece of evidence for this location. That's kind of what we're doing there. When it comes to working with people, though, that's a different wild card, right? I'm not trying to make someone feel silly, because more often,
that's got to be tricky,
right?
Yeah,
and more often than not, they've already felt silly. Like, it may have been a very big stretch for them to reach out to one of us to try and get help for something that they're really at their wits' end to try to figure out. And so we always come from a perspective of, this person is believes what they experienced is something paranormal. Whether or not right off the bat, as soon as they tell me, I'm like, ooh, it's probably this. I'm still coming from the perspective, this person has got to this point in their psyche, right? That this is where they're at, and they can't think it any other way. And so you have to be strategic with that, because if you are if you browbeat them with information, they're going to be like, screw you, man. You're not taking me seriously. I'm not going to take you seriously. Right. And you're not helping them.
Right.
We're trying to help them at that point, because they're so scared. They're calling us. We had families who were sleeping all in the same room because they didn't want to be alone. They were showering with a partner because they didn't want to be alone. So like, that sort of fear is something that is, from their perspective, very real. And so if you come across flippant about it, they're not going to take you seriously, and you're not going to be able to help them. And my concern is always that there's people that are far worse than me as far as how they go about doing investigations, that will make their situation work, that have gotten people to move out of their homes and sell their homes because they've convinced them that they're so haunted that they have to leave, putting their families in financial jeopardy and all these other issues. So
interesting.
I know I have kind of one chance maybe to be able to get them to think a little bit more rationally about that and show them like, hey, this is one claim that you had. Look, and then show the thing that I figured out that said, like, it's not, we don't think it's paranormal. We think it's just vibrations. We think it's, electrical, plumbing, and show them it. And then you can see in their eyes them being like, oh, like, that
relief,
makes sense.
Right? It's a relief.
Yeah. Like, that makes sense to me. I didn't think about that, because you're in your fear mind. And when you're in your fear brain, like, that rational thought is kind of gone. And so
that paranoia kicks in and shuts everything else down.
And as soon as they do that, everything becomes paranormal. You'll know, like, oh, this one event happened. Before that, nothing. This one event happened. All of a sudden, all these things are paranormal things. And so it's like the inflection point that they've had. Like, they went over and said, okay, I can't explain this. This has to be a ghost, or it has to be something paranormal, or a demon. That usually that's where the fear comes, is from the demon. And so the other part that you have to understand about people is they come from some very different backgrounds than myself, right? They have different religious backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds. And so it's on the fly. You have to kind of figure that out. We do have some questions. We try not, sometimes people get very, worried about, if you're asking, why do you care what religion I am, or, where I was born, or something like that, but those cultural and religious viewpoints will color how they're going to look at this. Certain cultures look at paranormal things one way versus another. And sometimes, certain religions, same thing. Anything paranormal is a demon, right? They're just trying to trick you. There's no such thing as ghosts. It's just a demon tricking you into thinking that it's a ghost. And so then everything has an evil tinge to it, right? It's trying to harm you or steal your soul. And so you have to try to be like, okay, but I don't think it's paranormal at all, so you don't have to worry about that aspect of it. I think it's this. And then, oh, it's just an electrical issue. Okay, well, that's in my realm. I can handle that. And then it gets them thinking more along those lines for other things that happen. Oh, yeah, when they were here, they found that. This weird thing just happened. Let me look and see if it might be related. And they end up fixing their own problem at that point.
Okay, you just went from like listening for evidence, but then you went over to like listening to people and like gathering like social cues from reading them. There's a lot of things that's going on here for you to, one, it sounds like you've got a very pragmatic approach in regards to gathering evidence and saying, here is the evidence, and we're just going to look at the evidence just as what it is. Mm-hmm. And then there's talking with the people that have asked you for their help. So there's a whole trust component there, relational component there, and yeah, I've got so many questions, but I'm going to go with give me an example of some resolutions that you've come up with that have helped, I don't know, resolve or just help clear something up for a client. The other question then on the other side is, what got you into this? Because it's fascinating.
Which one do you want me to answer first?
Go with the client one. Go with the listening to the client one.
Listening to the client.
So one example, we had an investigation. It was a family. This was a family that was sleeping all together in the living room every night. They'd been doing it for weeks, and they wouldn't shower without someone else in the bathroom with them. And the reason for the shower thing was the water was not the water in the shower, water in the sink was turning on by itself for like, a little bit. We didn't see the example when we were there. But then another claim was they had this air freshener, a plug-in, like you plug into an outlet. And so it was in an outlet, and they would claim that something would take it out and set it on the ground. Not that someone saw that happen. They would just find it on the ground. So this was an older home in Milwaukee, and it had wooden floors, original wooden floors. There was a lot of bounce to the floor. And what we noticed is that the outlet was not like the standard, 6 inches off from the bottom of the wall. It was actually, because it's an older home, it was added right into the baseboard, and it was added horizontally instead of vertically oriented. And so when you plugged in the air freshener, then it would be kind of horizontally as well in there. And we also noticed that the outlet was very loose. So, outlets, they wear out over time, like the ability to hold on to a plug, if you will. And so we noticed that when you walked back and forth just in the hallway, so this was kind of, it was in the main entrance to their home. You walked in, there was a hallway. It was kind of a little bit open. To the left was their living room, and there was kind of like a half, or like not a pillar, but it wasn't like a full wall. Like there's big openings into the living room, but there was like a wall in between. And it was on that outlet was there. And we just noticed when we were there, just walking back and forth, that the thing fell out. And so when we were setting up our equipment, we were like, oh, well, that right there is, that's the claim. So we replicated that claim. And then we looked at it and realized, outlet is loose, it makes sense. There's a lot of vibration here. It wouldn't take a lot for this to fall out. And so we were able to provide that explanation to the family. And when we did that and showed them, hey, here's the thing, this is why, you just probably need to replace this outlet, like, easy fix. And that's probably why. And then we were able to provide some explanations for some of the other things that they were experiencing. Not direct like that one, right? Like that one was definitive. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And you could see it in their brain like, oh, okay, yeah, vibration plus, old outlet equals this. It made them start thinking like, oh, well, maybe the water, like this is an old house. Maybe that fixture is failing, and that's why the water was turning on by itself. Or you get, they had radiant heat. So sometimes you get air in the line, and that can cause vibration, which can in turn, cause things to happen. And that allowed them to kind of switch. And this was a family that was very devout Catholic. And so this was, really outside, like they didn't want to, don't tell anybody you're coming here, like very, very secretive about the whole thing because, they felt they could be ostracized because this is what they were thinking was going on in their home. And there's also guilt with that there must be something I did wrong, that we did wrong, or someone in our family did wrong to bring this to our home, that this is happening here. And so that is by taking it out of that and saying, no, this is just a physical thing. It's just something it's at the end of its life. It needs to be fixed. You have an old house. There's things that happen in homes that aren't normal, quote unquote, but are because things break or wear out. And so you have to address those. And that switched their thinking to that. And then they were able to go back into their normal life. And, we're not gathering groundbreaking stuff here, right? But it's just having an outside influence, which luckily was us and not somebody who came in and said, oh yeah, you got 6 demons here, and said, we think it's this, nothing else is really going on. And then we also say, when you got really scared, what are some things that happen? A lot of times they have younger kids, and the kids look at the parents, and the parents don't realize, right? When you're a parent, you're like, I'm doing my parent thing, right? I'm focusing on that. But when you're reacting to things or responding about things, you don't realize in that time that your kid might be looking at you or might be hearing you. And then that in turn makes them scared. And that can actually cause them to think that other things which have been going on for months or years, they are now saying, oh, geez, mom and dad said this was something. And because of that, now that means, oh, geez, that means that's something for me too. Now I'm scared. And so that becomes a snowball effect because, kids are very impressionable, right? And what they see their parents doing or not doing has a direct effect on that as well.
I just wrote it down. How, because what you were describing was this snowball effect. Like once that, and I hate to use the term because I don't want it to come off as being critical or rude, but that paranoia component of it, it's got to lead to, well, this one thing was happening and then this, and then this, and now there's like 9 things going on. That's got to be extremely common to see that kick in, and then the nervousness kicks in and the panic kicks in, et cetera, et cetera. It repeats itself. So now it has to be true. How do you undo that snowballing effect?
Yeah, it's the hard reset. Yeah, it's I think part of it is that they've been in their own world for so long and we're outside of that world, and they have given us in what would I say in general too much credit, and they're trusting in us too much to be able to come in and give them advice about this or to give them some sort of perspective about it. But there's a lot of people who do that, and we talked about trust. There is a huge trust factor. When we do investigations,
they want you to say the plug falls out because of the faulty outlet and you got a bad sink, right? They want that explanation. most of the time.
If they're scared,
sometimes they want you to. No, we want you to tell us that there's crazy stuff happening.
We want you to tell us there's a ghost here, and we want you to have someone come and perform an exorcism.
Yes,
really. We're going to derail this entire thing and say, and go to that piece of the puzzle. Tell me about the experiences that you have when people are like, nah, man, I want you to tell me that we got Frank over here in the corner that's been haunting this place for 100 years.
Yeah, that happens. It happens because people think living in a haunted house is cool. Sometimes it happens because of grief. If it's something that someone has lost, a person that they've lost, and they want to feel that that person is still there with them around, it helps them with that. But
so it's actually a good thing. They actually want that presence.
Yeah, sometimes
they're looking for resolve.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay,
and we're in those instances again. We're not browbeating people with results. This happens oftentimes with widows who come up to us at library events and talk about something that happened that reminded them of their husband that passed on or their wife that passed on. And they always loved this or they always did that. And then this happened and it was this. And, it's very coincidental or something that I can come up readily with a potential explanation for. But what I tell my team, in those instances is as long as that person feels like they're moving on with their life, they're not living how they lived when that person was alive, then it's okay to just let it go. Let them think that because it's comforting to them, as opposed to someone who's like, I haven't gone out, on Friday night for 10 years because, me and my whoever used to do something on Friday night. And I know because of this thing that happens in my homes that they're always there. That to me is not healthy, right? You want someone to be able to move on with their life and live a life and not be tied to something that may or may not actually have anything to do with their deceased loved one. So there's that aspect of it. But you got the people who watch the paranormal shows and think that this is just amazing. And they call in teams to basically confirm what they've already concluded. They do not want to hear. We've been told, I don't want to hear alternatives to what I told you this is. I want you to tell me that you agree with me or you can leave. So
be part of my confirmation bias.
Exactly.
Right,
exactly.
yeah.
And we're like, that's not what we do. We come in, we give you our opinion based off the investigation we done or in our experience. You could take it or leave it. But at the end of the day, it is just an opinion. But we're not going to sit here and be like, oh yeah, definitely. That's exactly what's going on here, because there's enough people to do that. And they will. They'll find, there's plenty of teams who will just kind of feed into what that person is saying. because number one, it's super easy, right? And number two, it makes it a lot easier when you're doing that investigation, right? You don't have any work really to do. Like, oh, I heard a weird noise. Oh, it must be Fred. Fred's over there again making a sandwich. So like that's the sort of thing that we have dealt with. But the vast majority of people who are reaching out are scared, have something going on, and they're trying to figure out what it is. They've done, whatever they're able to figure out, their due diligence, if you will, to figure out what it is, and they've come up with nothing to explain it. And so now they're
looking for that logical explanation. That's the majority.
As far as it goes, yeah.
Yeah. Can you get into a situation, how do I phrase this? Can you get into a situation that you couldn't prove the evidence, that there wasn't some sort of logical explanation? Do you have any in that case, or are you batting 1,000 on, it's the refrigerator?
Not 1,000. There's stuff that's really hard to replicate, and eyewitness accounts is one of them, because eyewitness accounts are so notoriously bad. And so when you add fear into that, possible drug or alcohol use, or, being woken up, a lot of these things happen at night, right? So there's plenty of stuff that happens that claims that we can't replicate, for one reason or another. Sometimes it is something you think to be replicatable, but like, it could have been a one-off event, right? That those bits of things that happened all in a row in that time only happened that one time and will never happen again. And so you'll never be able to replicate it, no matter if you sat there every single day for years on end. Or it's replication that isn't going to happen because the person doesn't really remember how it happened anyways, and they're kind of pieced it together, and how stories evolve. And maybe they told it, they had the experience, they told one person, and like, hey, tell that person about that stuff. Oh yeah. And then it kind of evolves a little bit from there. And by the time it gets to you, it's a telephone game, right? It's been expanded quite a bit, and you'll never be able to replicate it. So there's lots of instances of that, actually. But what I always say is that, in those instances, you can't, like, what else happened, right? Like, so you have that one thing, and I understand that was super concerning to you, very scary. What else has happened? Or I'll say, why are you scared? Like, what makes you scared? Well, I can't see it. I'm afraid it's going to do something. Has it? Have you been harmed? Has it harmed anyone else? Are you seeing a knife floating towards somebody, while you're watching TV or something like that? Like, what aspect of it? Is it just the unknown because you think there's something there you can't see? Or is there something more than that? And that, again, shifts their process. It makes them think about their fear. Well, why am I scared? Mm-hmm. Is it because something actually hurt me, or am I worried that something's going to hurt me? And do I have any evidence to support that fear? Other than that, I thought something happened and I couldn't see it, and it was scary to me. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times I can shift their perspective on it as well. But there's all sorts of stuff where I can explain 3 things and then have 10 that I can't, But if I can explain 3, that gives me some, like, okay, there's probably not additional things going on here. The other things are just unexplainable because I wasn't there when it happened, and I can't give that perspective. It's all about perception at that point.
Yeah.
I would imagine people really, feel heard when you sit with them. You're asking a lot of follow-up questions. You're really trying to get in their perspective. You are doing a lot of work and just looking at things from all different angles. It must feel good for clients to feel heard.
I hope so, except when they don't want to hear what we have to say. But that's always the perspective: is this person is scared. We want to help them not feel scared. And so what is the best way we can do that? And that is taking all those cues into place and listening to them and say, okay, have you thought about this? Okay, have you thought about that? Show me, where did that happen? What time of day was it? Who was with you? Did anyone else hear this or feel this? Like getting all of those sorts of details. And then we oftentimes will have people who we're pretty sure there's not a lot going on, but they're psychologically, we feel they need more. We'll have them journal. We'll say, I want you for the next 2 weeks, the next 14 days, anytime something happens that you think is paranormal, I want you to write it down. And then here's the things I want you to include. Time of day. What's the weather? Who was with it? What was it? Was it a sound? Was it a feeling? Was it a, whatever? And then have them write down. Then after those 2 weeks, get back to us and let us know, what happened. And then if there's a lot of stuff happening in that 2 weeks, we'll do an investigation. We rarely hear back from those individuals, and we don't know for sure, But we think that when we give that assignment to people, then they realize that things aren't happening as often as they feel. It feels to them that it's happening. And as such, it becomes less urgent. Oh, in those 2 weeks, only 2 things happened. It wasn't as much as I thought. And those 2 things were really minor. Like they could have been something else. When you're making them focus on details, it makes them less scared because they're focusing on, well, what is happening? What is occurring? Yeah. What is happening outside? What time of day is it? I got to write down the time. And I'm not focusing, oh my gosh, that noise is making me so scared. And that's another paranormal event. And so I really think that helps them because it gets them out of the fear and into the logical part, right? You have to know what time it is to write it down. You have to know to look at your watch. You have to know who is present, you know?
It snaps you out of the paranoia almost because you have to like stop doing and write something and do a physical.
Or it's thunderstorming and we just had a big gust of wind and then I heard that noise. Geez, I wonder if that's related. Was it windy before? So it just makes people think about that a different way.
So you have this, based off of Brand's question, your answer, and what we've discussed so far. Shockingly enough, I had no idea that this was the path that we were going to go down for this podcast, which is pretty cool.
I love it.
That's why I love it. I love doing this. You have a real interest in listening. I was going down the path that, the listening is the evidence. The work that you do is about listening to the dripping faucet, is listening to and recorded evidence for hours on end that you set up overnight. Now you got to listen to 12 hours of nothing. But really, the work that you do has very little to do with that kind of evidence. It's a part of it, but the skill set and the listening is actually on the customer side. So it's listening to them on the front end of it, not necessarily just applying that listening piece to the back end of it or figuring out that evidence piece of it. You said you started this in 2005. To go back to Brant's question 15 minutes ago, you have an interest in listening to people and to help people. You're just picking a very unique method in which you're applying that. Where did that come from in 2005? Where did that stem from?
It goes back further than that as far as my interest in it, the paranormal. I always loved Halloween growing up. I grew up before the internet. So Halloween time was only around Halloween time. And, you know, the stuff in stores only showed up for like October and that was it.
Yeah.
And
those were the days.
Yeah. Right. And so I always loved that time of year. It's just interesting to me. It was intriguing to me, titillating, if you will, being scared or stuff that you couldn't see and having like almost superpowers, right? You could walk through walls and that sort of thing. And so when I was growing up, I always loved that. And when I was in college, I had every college has ghost stories. And I kind of looked into those a little bit while I was there, and I was getting a biology degree. So I'm a scientist by training. I have a bachelor's in biology. I have a master's degree in epidemiology and a master's degree in cell biology. So I've been trained to design experiments, to look for things like confounding factors, for biases, to try and make sure that when you're doing something, the conclusions you make are supported conclusions and not ones that have been, colored by other things which you haven't been controlling for. So when I was going to my first master's, I was living by myself in an apartment and I had a lot of time on my hands. And that's when Ghost Hunters, the TV show, first came out on Sci-Fi. It was in 2004.
Sure. Okay.
And so that was my first, I never knew that people went out and did this in any sort of organized fashion, was that TV show. And so when I saw that, I was like, well, they're 2 plumbers, nothing against plumbers, but I'm looking at scientific degrees here and I'm learning how to make sure that when you're doing experiments and things like that they're done in a proper fashion. Why can't I go out and do this? Like, I think I could contribute. And so that's why I started in 2005. I started looking for groups in the Milwaukee area, which is where I was attending graduate school. And I found one and I started working with them. And what I realized is that people did this any way they wanted to. There was no rules. Like, the rules were made by the person who ran the group. And you could do basically whatever you wanted. You could use whatever you want, come to whatever conclusions you want. It did not matter. There was no it has to meet this certain standard. And that irritated the crap out of me because as a scientist, you're like, no. There's why did you come to that conclusion? What's your supporting evidence? That's all we do as scientists. And so I realized after that it would be better for me to do my own group. And I never like had an experience. I know a lot of people do this, like, oh yeah, when I grew up in a haunted house or something happened to me when I was at whatever age. Nothing. I never had anything happen to me ever. I've done a lot of investigating though. I've done stuff before. I investigated a claim in a cemetery in my hometown when I was in high school, not realizing that that's essentially what paranormal investigation is, and came up with a conclusion. Like I found the answer to the mystery as to why that was happening. And that I think just made me like, gave me a taste. Like I like figuring stuff out. And that's really what science is, right? You're figuring out how the world around you works and understanding it. And I love that understanding. The benefit to doing it this way is because it's an amateur. So like I can't get a PhD in this, right? And so you don't have other people with PhDs who have far more training and experience as I versus like a doctor, or, a dentist, people who are professional, a mechanical engineer. Like I'm not going and telling your house is crooked or whatever, right? I'm in there to say your house might be crooked. You should have an engineer come look at it. These are the sorts of things that I can do because of the experience that it has allowed me to have. So my interest really stems from that, and then helping people not be scared in their own homes. Like that to me is just it's a public service that we do. We don't get paid to do this. That's why our nonprofit is based off education. We have my group is a 501c3 but nonprofit based on educating. We come and tell people, hey, this is what it is. This is what it isn't. It's not something you need to move for. You shouldn't, and that's a lot of what we do. But that's why I have that interest is figuring it out, helping people. And there's a really, really small part of me, and a part of what I do this is maybe I'll find something I can't explain, something that is just like, what the heck is it? How did this happen? And you never know when it's going to happen. And so that's kind of the three parts that keep me doing this for as long as I have.
There's this skill set of like not jumping to conclusions, like getting kind of swept up in things, but just being able to pause and say, wait a minute, let's look at this a little more. Let's give this a little more time before we jump into something. I don't know. I think that's just a skill set that we could all probably use because it's really easy to get swept up in anything and go, oh my gosh, this has got to be it. When it comes to those moments where you're like, I cannot explain this, you probably find this moment of awe of like, wow, this is cool. Like I can't explain it. I don't know what it is. Yeah, tell me about those moments when you hit that unexpected.
Yeah, so after doing this for so many years, there's so many things I could go through in my mind, like, oh, it's this. And I have a team around me that I've trained to be in that same realm. They're challenging me if I come up with something like, oh, what about this? And I love that because you can't think of everything. You're not going to remember everything. You're not going to know everything. There's some times where we have to reach out to actual experts, photography experts, video, HVAC. One of the people in my group works in HVAC. That's what he does for a living. So like we have kind of expert on staff there for that. But yeah, when we're all like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I can't explain it. At least not right now. That's what I say. I can't explain it right now. Maybe tomorrow, next day, more information as a scientist, right? You give more information. I reserve the right to change my opinion, but right now I can't figure it out. And we'll have to see if we can do it more. And then it's all about documentation. What happened, when it happened. We have a lot of equipment that we have with us that we use that do like environmental monitoring and things like that to ensure that we're capturing all those different variables to see what matters and what doesn't, and ensuring all those things are operating accordingly so that we can, if we really can't come up with an explanation for it at the end of the day, and we've taken it out to the world and said, tell me what this is. And if you can't figure it out, here's the raw data to tell, this is what we captured when the event occurred. That's what we really want to focus on. Because again, from a scientific perspective, replication is what you're trying to do. So can we replicate it? Can we get it to happen again? Yeah. And then document those things as well. But it's invigorating, I guess, because most of the time it's this, it's that, or, it's most of the time you're figuring it out pretty quickly or nothing's happening to figure out. So you don't have to worry about it. But when something happens, you're like, man, I don't know how that happened or why that happened. It's just, I would say, I'm not saying it's paranormal. I don't know what it did. And I can tell you all the reasons, the normal reasons that I've gone through and rejected because of these, we've set up the investigation in such a way that I can do that. I know the answers to a lot of questions. Most other groups won't even know why you're asking them.
We've talked about how you listen a lot. Can you get into a little bit, or maybe share a story with us of the family or the client that you're working with, and maybe an example of when they will not listen to you, or what you need from them to listen to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that really goes back to that relationship that you first develop. I mean, you're strangers when you walk into their home or you call them up on the phone to hear what they have to say, and ensuring that you're utilizing language that is not deprecating or could be perceived as flippant in regards to their concerns. You usually can tell when you talk to them if they're genuine or not. Some people aren't. Some people are there to try to do something else, but you can hear the fear in their voice, the concern. Like if they have kids, are all the kids there, or are the kids elsewhere? Do they have them away or in a different part of the house or building, so that they're not hearing you discuss about this? That shows you the level of concern that they have, and in turn, how serious that they're taking it. And that lets you know how serious that you should be taking it when you're asking the questions and how you're forming those questions. Observation plays a role too, like I said, looking and seeing how their house is decorated. What is there a lot of religious things or culturally relevant things that is adorning their home or their business, may also play a role in how you're going about that interview. But at the end of the day, what I always say is, I'm here to figure out the truth. My understanding is you are concerned about things that you feel are paranormal happening in your home, business, whatever it happens to be. Start from the beginning. When did it first start? And that first incident usually is the tipping point of when they have flipped over to, this is something paranormal. And my job most of the time is to get them to flip back and to consider other things. There are instances where people don't want to hear that, as we've discussed already before. They don't care. They've already determined it's something paranormal. They don't want to consider anything else. And unfortunately, there's not a lot that I can do at that point if someone has made up their mind. If it becomes part of their belief system, with a lot of things, if it's part of your belief system, it's really, you could be given irrefutable evidence that is not correct, and they will cling on to it even harder because they have already committed dollars, effort into that belief system. And so if someone is that hard, no matter what I do or say, it's not going to matter.
Yeah. And then you just have to leave your work there and go,
this is what we think.
It is what it is.
This is what we believe.
We've done our part.
And you can always take it for what it is. It's our opinion. At the end of the day, it's just our opinion. Based off of the evidence and our experience, and that's all. And you take that for what it's worth. But majority of people, if you give them that time of day and I guess people I thought you were going to laugh as soon as I told you that. I was like, why would I laugh?
Yeah.
Like
that trust piece of the equation
find to be concerning. So I'm here to hear it. I'm like, yeah, it's crazy that, you fell off the toilet and then the shower turned on. Like, that's a crazy thing to tell me. Normally, maybe I would have laughed if that was a story that I was telling somebody else. But you believe that something shoved you off the toilet and then turned the water on in the shower. So would be concerning to me too if I thought it happened to me.
Right. Yeah. I would imagine that you get asked a lot if you believe in ghosts.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not going to ask that question because I'm sure that's annoying. So I'll ask this question. What's your response when you get asked if you believe in ghosts?
So, yeah.
Do you like how we did that, Brant?
I get accused often of you're just doing this to prove it doesn't exist. I'm like, no, I'm not here to do that. So what I say is I'm skeptically optimistic. That's my response.
Ooh, I like that.
I wouldn't spend the time to do it if I didn't think there was a really, really small chance that there's something out there that we can't explain. But from the perspective of my training and my experience, the vast majority of claims are explainable. And so that's my explanation. So I do it because maybe there's something I'll find or I can help people and get them back to living their lives without worrying about their house being haunted. But the vast majority of the time, you get to solve mysteries. Figuring out the truth is fun. it's cool, right? When you can line that
Sure.
picture up, that's exactly it. And you can replicate it and take that picture and show it. And they're like, oh my God, it's the same thing. Like, yeah, that's that. And you point the things out and you see the realization. People are almost like, oh my gosh, I feel so stupid. It's like, no. Like this happens all the time. You're not the first person and you certainly won't be the last.
I'm thinking that if you buy Drew a Zoom H1 recorder, he would be happy to join you at anything. It's fascinating. For me, I would love to talk with you more about the HBO series The Last of Us from your epidemiology background.
Okay.
Because I think that would be a lot of fun too. But
maybe we need to have an episode on epidemiology and have a panel of epidemiologists.
I've done an interview before about could zombies happen and from an epidemiological perspective, if that would work. And the answer is it would work for about
part 2.
4 days, and then after that the breakdown would be too much, and when your muscles pulled on a bone to make you move, it would just rip the bone out. That would be the end of it.
That's the end of that episode.
So
that takes there's your answer, Brant.
All your zombies are just beyond the ground.
Your zombie episode just got crushed.
That's actually part of your world that has come to you. This is so great. This is so great. I love that you get to do this.
Brant, what's your takeaway from this episode?
My takeaway is that listening is important, and to not just jump to conclusions or let your brain jump to those conclusions, but to stop and back up and really just listen and look at things from the evidence side of things, to really check where my thoughts, beliefs, emotions might be going. And just pause for a minute and say, wait a minute, why is that there? And what is the evidence showing me? So that's my takeaway.
Fantastic. Noah, you just sat in an interview with a couple of strangers that put a high value in the skill of listening. What's your takeaway in terms of what's occurred over the last hour or so, talking about paranormal investigation and the skill of listening?
For me, I think when it comes to listening, it's the interactions with other individuals that you have to do that with, and ensuring that you're really hearing what they're saying can allow you to read between the lines, if you will, of what that conversation is actually holding. When it comes to the paranormal, yes, pause before something becomes paranormal, and try to seek out reputable sources to be able to evaluate concerning things you might have found on audio or video, which we do see quite a bit of. But I know that end up other places as well, and not as reputable. That might turn them into something that they're not. And being cognizant of that is important when it comes to the paranormal, and you can solve your own problems.
What's your takeaway, Drew?
When I was going through this and preparing for this and what I thought that this was going to be about the technology, different microphones, the time, the dedication to the back end of the investigation, and how listening is important when looking for ghosts. What I did not anticipate was the person-to-person skill set to do this the way that you're doing, which I believe is an incredible way about doing it. You could turn it into a show. You could look for the dramatic. You could make people feel like shit, all the other things to get the ratings, to get the business, to do whatever. You've opted out of that piece of the puzzle, and you said, I want to help people. And what we have found, Brant, over and over and over again, is that people that help people usually are very, very skilled listeners. That's my takeaway. And with that, Noah, thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for what you do. And I must say, I did not see anything fly over your shoulders that's unexplainable during this entire interview, which is what I was waiting to happen.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's enjoyable to talk about this from a different perspective than normally I do. And it plays a large role in what we do. And so it's fun to talk about it from this perspective as well. So thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Noah. This has been great.
All right, Noah, thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, take care. Bye.
in the description of this podcast, you will find more information and a list of any of the sources that we used.
This podcast is created and produced by Drew Richmond and Brant Christofferson. Editing by me, and the I'm Listening theme music by Drew.
That's me.
That's you.
Brant, I will talk to you later, my friend.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Have a good one, Drew.
Bye, Brant.